I think we can start with the first speakers. We have 2 speakers sharing a presentation on financial and economic trends. We have Sara Giusti and Daniela Corsini. So Sara Giusti holds a master degree in economics, obtained at Cattaneo University in Varese, Italy. She's an economist at the Industry Research Office for Studies and Research Direction at Intesa Sanpaolo Bank. She's involved in research regarding industrial economy, in particular on sectors related to the fashion industry and also on the Tuscany and Umbria regions. Her speech today offers insight for the Italian goldsmith sector regarding its positioning and the main strategies that can be adopted to guide it. Yes, so welcome, Sara.
Grazie, ringrazio Legor per...
Thank you very much. I would like to thank LEGO for their kind invitation. In my presentation, I shall try to share with you our most recent estimate on the industry. And let me say that in 2021, the goldsmith industry grew importantly. In 2021, there was a rebound that was just physiological after the drop that was experienced in 2020. Well, in 2022, the growth is certainly still there, which is a sign of a structural growth in the industry. This comes out even more evidently if we compare goldsmith industry with the fashion industry. On the right-hand side, you see that the goldsmith industry and custom jewelry grew by 30% in the first 11 months of 2022 when it comes to manufacturing percentages, whereas the fashion industry is still lagging behind, and it is basically stable as the rest of the manufacturing industry. This is happening at a time of stable demand for gold jewelry. At the beginning of 2022, based on the data of the Gold Council, the global demand for gold jewelry was equal to 1,500 tons, with a growth by 2% vis-a-vis 2021. And you see that in terms of markets, there are quite reassuring results in India, especially in the Middle East and in Europe. Well, actually, in the Russian market is certainly lagging behind because of the war, and India is still suffering because of the zero-COVID politics they had adopted. We still have a good result as supported by the demand at the festival in China and by the growth in the number of weddings. There's certainly a great competitivity on the foreign market. There's indeed a greater trend towards export and good results that have been recorded when it comes to export again. This is something that is pointed out by the chart on the left, where we've compared the trends, which sees an important growth on value-wise by 30% vis-a-vis the previous year and by 40% vis-a-vis the year before the crisis. This is the data that are available up until September 22. And you see that quantity-wise, the growth is still relevant, with an increase by 16% quantity-wise vis-a-vis the value of 2019. We also wanted to share with you a middle-term vision. So we wanted to show you that this is a process that comes from quite a long time. Here we are looking at the last 30 years, and you see that this bounce and there's a stability basically is the result of repositioning in the market. That comes, again, that dates back from a long time. Some 7 billion were the export for 2021. Again, this is the result of the repositioning of the industry vis-a-vis the higher end. And you see that main markets record growth. Certainly, US are doing well. The US are becoming indeed the first reference market for our experts. An important growth has been also recorded towards the Emirates, and then we've seen other markets that are growing that are certainly important in the luxury industry, as Switzerland, for example. And Ireland is another market that has been important growth since 2020. But here again, this should be seen because a number of goldsmiths have used this as a hub. But there are a number of multinationals that are targeting the Irish market. You should also recall that the Irish market has somewhat replaced the import it used to have from the UK with import coming from our country. And the export market for Irish products is China. In relative terms, not just looking at value, you see that Italy is growing importantly also in terms of market shares. Between 2012 and 2021, the market share for Italy grew by some 3 points. We stepped from 3% to 8%. And this has been made available also by the growth that was recorded on the US market. In this case, we looked at the weight that Italy has on the import of jewelry in the US, and you see that basically we shifted from 7% in 2009 to 12.5% in the first 11 months of 2022. This is very significant because of the role of the weight that the US play in the world of gold jewelry, of the top of the range gold jewelry. To further describe the development of this industry, we should also refer to the different districts. Indeed, at our bank, we look at different districts. We look at the Valenza district that account for some 80% of the exports. And you see that these are three districts, Valenza, Vicenza, are growing importantly, somewhat in the range of 30%. If you look at the pre-crisis value, you see that we are still lagging behind, especially when it comes to the Valenza district. But there again, we should recall that these data are expressed with reference to value because we don't have any other data. So there could be an underestimation there because it might not include the real trends. So this is the overview of the results that have been achieved in the industry. And we'd like to focus now on our expectations. Well, 2023 is going to be a year of change. We actually expect some kind of slowdown in the well-developed countries. At the end of 2022, we still have a lot of pressure as exerted by inflation. The inflation that is recorded is something that exceeds the one that we have seen in the 80s. But there are risks out there that we should pinpoint. First of all, inflation again. The development of inflation is quite remarkable, especially in view of the monetary policies that central banks are triggering. Monetary policies are going to be made necessary to curb inflation. We're faced with the two types of different inflation in the US. The inflation is supported by high demand, so monetary policies have more direct efficiency. In Europe, inflation is imported as connected to the oil shock, the energy shock. So the effects of the monetary policies are less effective. Energy is another important issue to consider. Thanks to the weather conditions, we've been supported, we've been helped in terms of curbing consumption. But this is an issue that we should consider again because the stock are going to be piled up in the future, and we have to look out and see what is going to happen on the energy market. There is another important subject, and that is the geopolitical risk as connected by the war between Russia and Ukraine. So the intensity and the length of the conflict is certainly to bear importantly on that. Now, looking on the US, our expectations are of important change in the US. Our expectations indeed are somewhat connected to a technical recession, which we believe is going to be of little intensity and little duration. In terms of monetary policies, we believe that there's going to be a change there as well. As far as Europe is concerned, while the situation is a bit more complicated, Europe has been more affected by the energy shock, something that has not impacted on the US cost-wise. European governments have supported companies and families to tackle the oil shock, or to the energy shock, so as to try and reduce the effect that families and industries have to bear because of the energy costs. In terms of monetary policies, we've seen that the European Central Bank certainly has some little effectiveness. The discount rate is somewhat around 3.25%. Let's look at the data for Italy now. 2022 has been certainly bright for Italy. In 2022 has benefited of the good results in the manufacturing industry, the building sector that has been also supported by tax incentives that have been granted by the Italian government. And the good trend in the manufacturing industry can be recorded, especially looking at the rest of the European countries. In this chart, you see the turnover vis-à-vis 2019, and you see that there's been a rebound in 2020 and with a growth in 2022, something that was unexpected if compared to other European partners. This means basically that our entrepreneurs have been extremely resilient. Tourism has certainly boosted these good results. These are the results coming of a survey that we have carried out. We have interviewed a number of observers as to what they were seeing about 2022, especially when it comes to Italian tourist industries. And you see that half of the respondents were expecting to go back to the situation before 2019, which is evidence of the fact that a number of tourist destinations are actually proving to be resilient and have yielded very good results in 2022. As for 2023, well, we believe that we're going to expect two different situations occurring. At the beginning, we're going to see a slowdown. You see that there might be a technical recession, but in the second half of the year, thanks to the investments being made by, thanks to the National Plan for Resilience and Recovery, and then because of inflation, we're going to grow again. Overall, as for 2023, the average growth is going to be 0.3%, which is going to be better as from 2024. In 2024, indeed, we expect a growth by 1.8 as an average again. Now, we should connect these expectations also, or we should connect these forecasts also for the gold jewelry industry. Together with the Club degli Orafi, we've carried out a survey. We've asked companies whether they were expecting to see a growth on their turnover for 2022. Interesting enough, as you may see, there's a percentage of a growing company through the different editions of the service that we've been carrying out. And you see that At the latest edition, at the latest survey, which was carried out between February and January, the number of companies who are expecting to see their turnover growing is growing, and we've gone back to the beginning, before basically the conflict had broken out. So 22 actually has certainly been a very good year for the whole industry. As for 2023, forecasts are in line with what I said earlier on. So the business community in this industry expected to see some kind of slowdown. This slowdown is going to affect the home market, most specifically. We have indeed we measure very good trends for exports. The whole market certainly has to bear the burden of inflation, which is going to eat out the purchasing power of consumers for products that, of course, are not necessary products. There's another aspect that we're trying to identify, and that is the capability to see whether there has been a loss of competition vis-à-vis other manufacturers in the rest of Europe. This has been what we have searched for in our survey. We see that the main competitors in Italy that are the other Italian manufacturers and European competitors. So this basically tells us that the top of the range is most interesting for the majority of businesses in the industry. Competitors usually are not perceived as the main competitor. The national competitors are not considered as the main competitors in other industries, but in this industry, indeed, they are perceived as such. What about the difficulties that the industry has to come to terms with? Well, again, in our survey, we see that the business community perceives that the main difficulty has been identified as the lack of labor. So skilled labor apparently is what hits the industry worst. The second, there's a concern about the availability of raw materials. If we nearly all of the companies basically suffer from the lack of skilled resources, because again, the top of the range, of course, requires a very skilled human resources. We looked at the responses we had obtained at the end of the year, and you see that we shifted from 27 to 51% of the companies perceiving that the lack of skilled personnel is perceived as a great difficulty. As a matter of fact, the management of prices of raw materials is perceived not as much as an emergency as was said at the end of the year. When it comes again to raw materials, I think that my friend Daniela Corsini should take the floor and speak more